Welcome back to The Cost of Living, the show where we dive deep into the challenges of the housing market, the struggles of finding an affordable place to live, and the realities of navigating housing instability. I'm your host, Lily, and today we're exploring one of the most pressing issues facing so many Americans today, the high cost of housing and the growing homeless crisis. In this episode, we sit down with Genmark Barnini, a first-time renter who's recently moved into his own apartment. Genmark shares his personal journey through the maze of housing options, the challenges of securing a place in a market where prices seem to rise faster than the wages, and how his own experiences have shifted his perspective on homelessness and the housing instability crisis. We'll talk about the emotional and financial toll of this process and how these challenges are reshaping our understanding of what it means to have a place to call home. Genmark, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
What challenges did you face in terms of availability, affordability, or location when trying to find a place to live?
Finding a place to live is one of those things where you have to pick two out of those three, because finding something available isn't something that's going to be out of your price range, or it's going to be in a location that you don't exactly want to live in, or if it's something that is inexpensive enough, it's not going to be available for long.
Have the rising cost of rent made it harder for you to find an affordable place to live?
Absolutely. A lot of the places that when I first decided to move out, they were within my price range, but then year after year, they started rising up in price and they slowly become unattainable.
Have you ever had to make sacrifices in other areas of your life to afford rent? And what do those sacrifices look like?
Absolutely. So it's either I have a good work-life balance and barely enough to just get by, or I work myself to death and have rent and other expenses covered and just sacrifice my work or my social life.
Have you ever felt the fear or anxiety of possibly not being able to afford your living situation? And what has that experience felt like?
Absolutely. It would be where I had barely just enough to cover rent and nothing else. And I, soon after clocking out of one job, I'd have to clock into another one, like DoorDash or Instacart, anything of that sort where you make extra money on the side.
With the average cost of a house in Connecticut being about $410,000, it would require anywhere from a $15,000 to $30,000 down payment. How long do you think it would take for you to achieve this?
I'm barely making enough to get by, just covering all my expenses, so rent, bills. So I don't know if I can put a number on how long that would take me.
The cost of housing has increased significantly in recent years. Do you think this is contributing to issues like homelessness or housing instability? And if so, how?
It definitely is. Housing has just become one of those things that is very unattainable for a lot of people. So a lot of people resort to renting, but the cost of rent has basically equaled the cost of a mortgage. So it's one of those things where you're barely making enough to get by on renting, and just housing just seems something so far out of the question where it's just unattainable.
What do you think local or national governments can do to address the current housing crisis? Are there any policies you think would help make housing more affordable for people in your position?
There's a few things that local governments here in Connecticut could do. For starters, you could either put a rent cap, like a cap on the rent, and that way it allows people to save up for a house down the line. Another thing is to not allow corporations to buy up all the houses and start renting them out, which is something that's starting to become a trend. Or lastly, a lot of people that own rental houses here or apartments, stuff of that nature, they're from outside of the state. So they could either tax those guys more because they're just basically utilizing our lower prices compared to where they live, like New York, New Jersey, where houses are double or triple the price there than they are here. They buy up all the houses and they rent them all out. So there's a number of things that the local government can do to help the local person here.
In your opinion, what does it take for someone to fall into homelessness? Is there a specific tipping point or series of events that can lead to this situation?
I've heard it once said that everybody in this country is a bad 2 months away from being homeless. And that's very true. If I was to be laid off tomorrow and not able to find work, I could easily find myself being homeless. That coupled with if I was to turn to drugs or alcohol, I would only exacerbate that problem even further, leading me down a path which is very hard to return from.
Are there any specific financial strategies that you have used to make living on your own more affordable?
Definitely budgeting. Budgeting is the biggest thing. A lot of times you have to account for everything in like a week-to-week basis. You can only spend X amount of money on food, or you can spend X amount of money on transportation. And if you go over, then you're at risk of not being able to pay a bill or pay a bill late.
What portion of your monthly income goes towards housing, and how does that compare to what you anticipated?
I would say about a good half of my paychecks go towards housing. That doesn't take into account any bills and utilities like electricity, heat, water, sewage, things of that nature. And not accounting for anything like transportation, like gas or food. So when you tally all those things up in a good month, it gets kind of get close.
In your experience, do you feel society places enough importance on housing as a fundamental need, and why or why not?
I think we once did, which is why it was called the American Dream. Like that was the thing. It was like once upon a time, you worked hard, you saved enough, you could afford a house, and that was the dream. Now it's become to the point where there's corporations buying up all these houses left and right, and it's just making it harder and harder each year for this, for the average person to be able to buy a house. So I don't think now, as of right now, government and society as a whole, they're not really placing that much of an importance on it because they'd rather help the corporations out a bit more, I would say.
Has your perspective on homeless people changed since you've had to navigate these challenges yourself? Why or why not?
Absolutely. A lot of homeless people, they just had a bad hand in life, and they're trying to navigate that out of it, but society just doesn't help them out as much as it should. Once you get down there, it's just really hard to get out of it, and it can happen to anybody. If I was to lose my job tomorrow, I'd be very concerned about trying to make enough to save, to make rent, or forget saving, just getting by would be hard. And it could happen to me, it could happen to anybody, honestly. So it's just, I have a lot of more sympathy for people because they probably started out just like me, just had a rough go of it, and they just end up where they are.